So, welcome, Anthony, to Metalliron Pages. It's a great pleasure to talk with you about Without Waves, this new fucking awesome album, Comedian, because I really like it. And I did my pre-order a few weeks ago. So, and more things related to the metal scene in general. So, starting with this Comedian is your second album, as I'm searching around the web. So the first album was an EP according to the time length. So how would you describe the transition to the EP, to the first album, to this new one?
Great question. I think, we started the band in 2010. And certainly ever since we started the band, we've kind of been finding ourselves ever since, So three of us have been playing together for about 20 years now. And then one of us joined shortly after that. So collectively, anywhere from between 15 to 20 years. We played in the band previously together. Without Waves, we started with the intention of being able to kind of essentially do whatever we want. And I think over the past 10 years, we focused on that and then have now, in my view, kind of gotten to a better place where we know what we want and we're kind of better at getting to it, if that makes sense. I think we've done a really good job with this new record. So
okay. I've been reading all the stuff from Without Waves, especially from for Lunar, from the first album, and I read a lot of reviews. So this new one still have done reviews, but I hear all albums. So this Comedian, I hear all albums. So but the way that the many reviewers try to say this about your style, about your label, is mathcore, is progressive, is degen, it's a lot of mixtures there. For all reviewers, it's very complicated. So for that, how are you describe the music into this Comedian? Is what kind of label can fit into this new album?
The best that we could come up with, because there are lots of different elements rolled into one. Post-progressive, and we're not necessarily like completely sold on that by any means, but as far as a general descriptor, yes, there are progressive elements for sure. Yes, they're just general metal elements. There's a lot of melody too, there's a lot of vocal harmonies, but then there's also a lot of dissonance and things like that. So I mean, we draw from a wide variety of influences. The best that we've been able to kind of come up with, I think, is post-progressive. But if you have any suggestions, let us know, because we'll gladly take any critiques and info on that. So.
No, okay. When I finish to listen this Comedian, for me it's extreme metal, because extreme metal has a lot of things. It's much better to describe your sound. When you try to figure out what happened really, progressive, degen, pop, rock, many people try to think but for me it's much better to say extreme metal with a lot of flavors.
No, that's a great descriptor, and especially too, like I think about maybe like the first 4 tracks on the record, are arguably the heaviest, or whatever the case, and yes, we have elements of extreme metal, absolutely, those are there, but like you said, different flavors. So it's difficult. Like, I think there's validity in having a label that a large group of people can hear a descriptor and then kind of know what something sounds like. But on the flip side of that, there also is, like, not necessarily always a need for labels. People are going to like what they like, regardless of what that might be described as. So
okay, one thing that captured my attention is the cover art from this Without Waves, because there are two flamingos. One is picking his head and the other. So what exactly means? Because the Comedian is like when you read the word comedian, is funny. So when I see flamingos and one is hurting the other one, I try to connect the meaning of the Comedian, the music, and the concept of the cover art. So can you describe this relationship?
Absolutely, yeah. I think, well, it's kind of two different things for me. Our guitar player, Zach, actually came up with the title of Comedian. And the way that I look at that is there is humor in human tragedy. And some of the lyrical content on the record certainly has to do with a lot of, personal experiences, but over more of a collective, experience when it comes to, anxiety and stress and anger and frustration and acceptance and all of these things, kind of rolled into one. Those themes are very present throughout the record. And Comedian for me is just a way of, there's humor in human tragedy. There always has been, there always will be, and there are times where you kind of look at the state of the world. I'm sort of paraphrasing from my guitar player, Zach, but you look at the state of the world and there are times where you just have to laugh at its absurdity, As far as the cover art goes with the flamingos, that's sort of, there's a duality there. At first glance, it looks very grisly. It looks off-putting, with the mama and papa flamingo kind of feeding the little chick hatchling there. But looking into that further, what they're actually doing is that's like a regurgitation. It's crop milk, so it's essentially nourishing the young hatchling. And so the way that I look at that is just never kind of judge a book by its cover. There may be things on the surface that look a certain way, but if you delve deeper, you're going to find more meaning and most likely, more nourishment, at least if it's something that's supposed to be nourishing. So.
Okay. One thing that you said is this new album has the lyrics, is a relation with the comic part and with the tragic part. That's a very opposite ways to understand the links, good and bad. So how do you relate the good and bad way to understand in one way?
Sorry, you cut out there for just a second, but you were asking about like the comparison between.
Okay, the connection, because the good and bad are the antonyms from each words, because tragic and comedian is very different significance, very different subjects.
Absolutely. But I think you kind of expand on that point there. That's life, right? Life is a combination of it's not all good, it's not all bad, it's never and it's part of this record. By the time you get to the end of it, in the song 7, there's a certain level of acceptance that comes along with it. That things, the phrase "the light at the end of the tunnel," while very hopeful and while I think appropriate to say and believe in certain instances, it's not always light at the end of the tunnel. It might be gray and it might be cloudy and it might be unclear, but there's a certain level of acceptance in just realizing that, yes, life is very difficult and very nuanced, but there are things that are good, and those are the things that I'm going to focus on. So I think that is kind of like what it is, because we're showing two sides of the coin there. So.
Okay. So I've been hearing this new one, and I tried to compare with your first album, Lunar. So for you, which are the biggest strange that this album has compared to early productions in Without Waves?
Lunar, the songs were written over maybe about a 5 to 6 year period, and while I love all of those songs, Comedian was written over a maybe 2 to 3 year period. I think there's just some natural, more cohesiveness because of that, because all the music is stemming from us. A lot has changed since, 2017. A lot can change over a 5-6 year period, as a 2 to 3 year period, but less so, as far as just your own, personal development and your artistic output. So I do think Comedian, we took what we did on Lunar and a lot of those themes and aspects, but I think we did make a much more focused record. I think the songs are better, or maybe written better. I feel lyrically we've definitely stepped it up, especially when you read through and if you're looking through the lyrics, you'll be able to kind of connect each song to one another, or different songs to different, there are certain phrases and things that we've done to try to, it's not a concept record by any means, but we definitely made a concerted effort to try to connect all those dots. So.
Okay, okay. Well, since the beginning, you are with Prosthetic Records, with the Lunar and this new comedian. So how was the support to Prosthetic Records since the beginning to now? Perhaps for the future, you will change the label, because with this comedian, for me especially, perhaps some bigger labels will check your music and sign up. So who knows?
Sure, Prosthetic's been great. You know, they've been super supportive. You know, they signed us back in 2017, and you know, with this record too, and just working with you know, Steve and Will and Becky. They've been super supportive as we've been kind of making the releases. We were really happy to get a video done for them as well. You know, the video for Good Grief that we shot back in December. And so, yeah, no, everything's been going really well with them. You know, we're really happy that we're working with them.
Okay, okay. So one trend that I've been seeing around the world is the mathcore touch around the all new bands, with Popular Slicer now Without Waves has a little influence of the mathcore scene. So for you, what is biggest inspirations for the mathcore scene? Perhaps it's Botch, perhaps it's Car Bomb, perhaps it's Dillinger Escape Plan. So this kind of band. So, and what do you think about the mathcore scene? Perhaps it's the new wave to do metal, extreme metal nowadays, because a lot of bands do this kind of style now.
Absolutely, yeah. I think you know, I can speak for all of us that we're definitely, you know, big Dillinger Escape Plan fans. You know, I remember discovering that band, I think around like 2008, right when their Ironworks record came out, which is a very important record just for me personally. And they were one of those bands too that even with just their style, you know, of music and mathcore and just the kind of spastic nature of it that I was really drawn to. I really loved, you know, that record and just their intention, I think, as a band. You know, that record in particular to me just stands out. So, but yes, Car Bomb, also really cool. Pupil Slicer, who's on, you know, Prosthetic, like there does seem to be kind of an interest in some of the more kind of dissonant aspects, you know, of metal there, but also kind of rolled into, there's a certain level of, like with Pupil Slicer, you know, hearing that new track, there's a certain level of like catchiness and like hooks to it too, you know. Car Bomb, they're really, really cool. They're crazy. That band is so awesome. And then, yeah, they're one of those bands that I think kind of pushing boundaries as far as just stylistically. So
okay. So I will ask one. I love to ask one the next question about perhaps do you hear this matter about the Synesthesia matter?
So what was it? I'm sorry.
Synesthesia.
No.
Okay, synesthesia is when a person listen a song on a band, they see colors, they feel they smell others, they'll taste flavors.
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
okay.
Devin Townsend.
Yes,
that, right?
Yes. Okay, okay. As your music is complex in styles, in this kind of matter, so for you or for all band, what kind of odors and tastes and colors that the listeners will find into this comedian?
Ooh, that's a really great question, actually. Wow, that's a fun question. It's interesting. Okay, so we have a lot of pink now because of the flamingos, right?
Yeah.
You know, so I think there is sort of a nice the juxtaposition of pink and black, and you know, the greens of the album cover, the red of the crop milk. I think all of those colors are you know, a fantastic way to describe the different feel you know, of the record. If I had to pick one color to describe our band, I would say purple. Actually, we've had discussions about this in the band, because there are aspects to us that I would describe as red, you know, very visceral, very heavy, very extreme. And then there are other aspects to us that are very, very blue and a little bit more heady, which I think, yeah, combining those, clearly, you know, that'll make purple. And so yeah, that's probably where we fall within that spectrum. So coming from a complete novice layman, I don't understand any of that.
Okay, yeah, okay, it's a very difficult question. Someone, as I anecdote, I spoke with other bands and they told me my album smells like a coffee in the mornings. Other people say that chocolate with milk. So it's very different appreciation for each album. So that's amazing. It's very difficult to know how, because we need to have this gift to understand which is the best way to.
Yeah.
Well,
that's a cool question though. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Okay, so well, as I said in the first question, we will focus on other kind of things into the metal scene, because one thing that you said constantly is about the dissonant sound. But for me, and especially I think for all the world, the dissonant sound creates in the 90s with one album from Oscura, from Gorguts, because this album pregonate a lot of dissonant. But now the dissonant wave or the dissonant trend has new styles into there. So how do you describe the first influence in the dissonant into your music from without waves, and which perhaps this dissonant element will impregnate or will spread around the world, and it's a new style that has dissonant extreme music, black dissonant death metal, etc., no?
Sure, yeah. I think growing up, I mean, the four of us were all exposed to a wide array of different, you know, types of metal. So one of the a couple of us are really big King Crimson fans. You know, Gorguts that you mentioned, Origin, I'm trying to think over Cynic and whatnot, you know, so things like that. For me personally, Dillinger Escape Plan for me was super important in I think just had like a bigger, like profound effect on me as far as just their combination of those dissonant elements, but also just the punk rock vibe to it too. You know, it was just so all over the place and you kind of never knew where it was going. And it became a very, very enjoyable listen to me. So I think like overall, we draw from just a huge wide variety of different bands like that. But certainly early on, you know, I think anytime like you're getting into a new type of music, you kind of start with some of the more foundational elements, and then you start to kind of break out and, you know, see what you like there. And definitely within the metal genre, I mean, like you were saying too, there's so much you can do within that umbrella, you know. So
okay. So talking about now the singles and these playlists, the digital platforms, because this is the new wave to hear music around the world. So, yeah. But with these new forms of hearing new music with Tidal, Spotify, iTunes, etc., and more, so the new generation just select 1, 2, 3, at maximum 4 songs in an album. They not pay attention for whole album. So for you, why the albums doesn't have the same impact compared to the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s into the metal world or around the world? Well, into the metal world, because the pop scene, this mainstream, that mainstream scene just only revival with one song or two songs, like Michael Jackson. I always remember for 10 or 20 songs, but whole album is completely to understand. So
no,
into this matter, and what does band needs to do to improve or to encourage all songs from an album, or to motivate you with this album you find all songs catchy?
That's a great question. You know, it's defined by whatever technological conduits are in place when someone is discovering new music, right? Back when we were growing up, like, you know, like I remember growing up and waiting for like Tuesdays, because that was going to be the release day where I could go down to the store and buy a new CD or whatever the case. And the actual, like, I guess just sort of audio-visual process of placing physical media into something to play it, and, you know, going through the liner notes, reading about the band. You know, this was pre-smartphone for me. I'm certainly dating myself right now, but like there was a certain level of interconnectivity with that that I think lent itself towards listening to a whole piece. Now our lives are defined by ones and zeros, man. Everything is just so automated and algorithmic. Um, you know, for me, I listen to everything off of Spotify, right? You know, and so I still listen to whole records for sure, and I will go out and I'll buy, you know, whole records, you know, when I'm like really really intensely like moved by them. Um, but then, you know, in general, it is a different animal because when you have infinite choice, it does kind of like, you know, I kind of compare it to like, you know, when you're like trying to find something to watch on Netflix or whatever streaming service that you have, and you sit there and you can't find anything to watch because there's so much to fucking choose from. Like it's kind of like that to me. But I do think there is validity in, you know, playlist suggestions and things like that, which, you know, there's music that I would have never discovered if it hadn't have been recommended to me through some of those playlists. So I sort of compare that to, you know, kind of going to a, you know, record store and sifting through things and almost kind of like taking a chance on something based on the cover art or what have you. But yeah, no, it's different now. I do think within the metal genre, I think there are more people who are more interested in listening to, you know, full albums and things like that all the way through. But you know, that being said, it's all relative. Everyone's different. So
Yes, yes, well, yes, yes. When the music industry changed a lot since the 60s to now, it's very different
yeah.
way. So,
Mm-hmm.
into this, well, in other kind of matters, you see, as we spoke in these first questions, the extreme music is completely changed now if we compare to the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. Because when you remember Morbid Angel, Slayer, there are very catchy songs. There are very like one wave songs with A, B part, like chorus, strophes, this kind of stuff. But in the 90s, the music changed. Well, the music is still the same. But the 2000s, when the Dillinger Escape Plan appears, and perhaps Strapping John Ladd and Meshuggah appears, a lot of new bands, and now you can see the 2010, 2020s. So you can see the new wave or the new ways to do extreme music is very different than the old ways. And for that, why the extreme music continue to grow up, continue to the old musical styles like heavy metal, like rock, like jazz, like pop, like thrash metal, this kind of stuff. Because these styles, as you can hear, new bands with new wave of British heavy metals, for example, a band now with this kind of sound is the same sound from the 80s and 70s. But when you can hear without waves, it's very different. You try to relate some bands, but it's impossible to say these bands influence a lot to these bands. It's not way. So why the extreme metal continue to grow up with these new waves, the new sounds, with the different kinds of do extreme metal?
Yeah, I just think it really has to do with, you know, that band or that, you know, writer or composers, you know, like, you know, personal experience. I think some of the, you know, when we were growing up, there were certain ways to do certain types of metal, right? There was a little bit more rigidness when it came to that decision making, as far as like, oh no, let's do this here or that here, you know, because like prior to starting Without Waves, we were all in a thrash band together, right? You know, and we were specifically kind of like focusing on that side of the metal spectrum. And then naturally over time, we started recognizing, oh, we're kind of wanting to do different things without that label, I guess, you know. I think naturally, like, people just kind of like grow into it, and you certainly feed off of, you know, whatever content that's coming into your life and whatever music you're listening to, or, you know, even like in Chicago, where we're from too, like, you know, the scene here is littered with like a lot of different types of bands, a lot of very talented bands and things like that. And so, you know, when you're growing up and you're going to shows and you're just being exposed to a lot of different things, I think that can kind of lend itself to you being a little bit more willing to take chances. And then especially like with us, like we eased into that over time, and now it's just like you know, we'll come into the room with anything, you know, like we can literally write anything that we want to within the context of Without Waves, even something that's not necessarily metal, you know, like we can do that, or we have the option to. So
yes. Well, in general, the extreme music changed a lot during these times. It's very difficult to know what exactly label or what exactly styles this. Well, especially as I told you, it's very difficult for me to say Without Waves is this kind of style because it's impossible to know. So, well, we are very closer to close to in this interview. So what are the future plans that Without Waves has for the future? Perhaps our Latin tour here, who knows, or perhaps more videos, etc. No?
Yeah, of course. So we have another single that's going to be coming out in the next couple of weeks. We have a release show in Chicago on March 19th, the day after the record is released on March 18th. And then from there, we're working on some plans to do some touring, probably like in the summer or whatever the case. There's some other stuff that we have kind of in between then and there that we'll be kind of sharing as time goes along. But yeah, I think most importantly, we're really, really excited to get this record out. You know, it's been 5 years since Lunar came out. We started recording this record pre-pandemic, and then when the pandemic hit, we were still kind of, you know, finishing things up, and we decided to kind of like focus on that, spend a little bit more time on it because of everything that was going on. But yeah, we're just really, really happy to get it out there. So.
Okay. And the next question goes to the, well, as you know, many reviewers said when a band came up with an EP, with a first EP, with a first album, they said that the first EP and the first album is the great album that they never separate the new album with the new album. The first is always the best. But at the same time, the band thinks differently because the band thinks that the last album is the best one compared to the first one. So into this matter, where are you? This album is the first album to the date now. Perhaps you still think that the first album has a great memories and it's still great.
That's a great question. I think internally, you know, we're at the point where this is I feel this is our best album that we've done thus far. You know, but you know, that being said, I think different bands kind of function in different ways. I think there are bands that kind of grow into themselves, which I would consider us. And then there are other bands that can catch lightning in a bottle right off the bat, you know, and we've all had those like first album experiences with bands where we're like, holy shit, this is incredible, you know, and there is sort of like a certain level of like magic to that I love. But more importantly than that, I think it ultimately comes down to the listener, you know, like you really want, it's going to be interesting to me to see how people who listen to us compare this record to our last record. Because our last record, there's some people out there that are probably somewhat attached to it or attached to certain songs on there. And that's kind of the beauty of it too. It's just like, it's all subjective, you know, there's not, it's gray and cloudy. It isn't black and white, you know, it's the differing opinions are going to be there. And yeah, I'm just looking forward to seeing how people like it. So.
Okay. Well, Anthony, the sad times arrived at this interview. I hope you enjoyed this one as I did. And thank you very much for your time. As I said in the first question, comedian for me, it's fucking awesome. Really, really, I enjoy all songs. I did my pre-order. I hope I arrived soon. So anything you want to add to your Latin American fans and Metalerium readers?
Just thank you for your support. Thank you for like having us here, and you know, it's an important part of getting new music out there for people to hear, man. Like, and so the work you do is very appreciated. And just in general, man, yeah, thank you, and thank you to everybody who's taking the time to listen. So